Welcome back to Hail Mary Hotline. We are coming to you today with a very special episode. It's our last one of season one, and we have a very special guest with us today. Bridget, why don't you tell us who we have joining us today?
Yeah, Hail Mary Hotline is very happy to have our special guest star, my uncle Adam Cushing, who is the run game coordinator and offensive line coach for Texas A&M.
Thank
So
you so
very
much for
excited to
joining
have
us.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, so I guess diving right on in. As someone who has coached at 4 different programs across 4 different states, what are some consistencies or I guess non-negotiables that you would look for in your future team and staff?
Yeah, awesome question. I think the great part about college football is the opportunity to work with the type of people that get into this, right? That in football has become lots of things, and there's a lot of narrative out there, but in the end, college football is still about training 18 to 22-year-olds, and there's still a lot of impact that we can have on their lives, right? And so what we look for is, or what I look for is being around good people that want to make an impact on young men, right? And then we look for young men that want to be the best version of themselves every day, right? And that's when we're recruiting, that's what we're targeting, is those type of young men that have a growth mindset, that are willing to step outside their comfort zone a little bit, in pursuit of something a little bit more than they are today. And if you put those two things together, right, being around great people that want to impact people and being around great young men that want to be great, it has a great impact on my life, right? It has a really positive impact on my day-to-day life. I say it all the time, this is not a job, this is a lifestyle, right? I spend a lot of time, most of my time, with the people that I work with at A&M, and I want to be around great people doing it.
I think that's great. I think that speaks a lot to the testament of, I think as fans, also what we want to see with these college football programs is that character development and team development, people that really do want to be there for the, lifestyle of their guys, making sure that they're being there to be great, that y'all are there to make them great. And I think that's great. I think that speaks to a lot of you as a coach and also to some of the teams that we have in the SEC. So speaking of, what are some of the biggest, I guess, culture shocks when moving conferences and across these 4 programs and states?
Yeah, I've had a good fortune to coach at a bunch of the Power Four conferences at this point. Certainly, every place has its unique cultures and traditions. But I'd be remiss. Texas A&M is really something else, right? The SEC, and I've only been there one season, and I've only visited however many other places. I kind of, the number escapes me off the top of my head how many away games I guess we had in league last year. But the commercial, right? It just means more. It's real,
Mm-hmm.
right? I say that to my
Yes,
friends
it
all the
is.
time, right? Growing up in Illinois, and being around Big Ten football for the first 15 years of my career, it's what I grew up on, what I knew. But the SEC is different. It just is.
It just means more. We say that all the
It
time
just
on the
means
podcast.
more.
Really do speak to it. We love the SEC, and of course, being an SEC school. And I think that a lot of people that either start even moving towards a fan base part of being in the SEC, and I know especially from coaching, just have that noticeable difference. And I guess it really is just a culture and kind of a family of the SEC. Football aside, are there any kind of noticeable differences in being at an SEC school?
Um, wow, football side. Well, I know you guys are a little more UGA for sure, and I haven't had the opportunity to go there yet. But Texas A&M, the traditions, just the from the fans themselves, just from the entire university, is pretty unparalleled in what I've seen and what I've been around. So I think probably just the passion, right? Just from top to bottom, and certainly, supporting the football team on Saturdays, but from just support of the university in general, right? And just passion for the university from Sunday through Saturday, all the way through the end of Saturday. It's not just about the football program, it's about the entire university.
Do you have a favorite tradition at Texas A&M?
Oh boy.
There's a lot of them.
It's incredible how many there are. And when you are on the outside looking in, you don't understand, I think, the true dedication and the true passion that they're rooted in, right? They're not just hand gestures. They're not, I mean, there's actually a deep meaning to all of it. And it's so rooted in the military founding of the university, right? Which I just think is so cool, right? Obviously, the core and the way that the core, stands for the game, all that stuff, like I think is probably what hits me the most, right? I feel very, very patriotic when, with all of the Texas A&M traditions.
Absolutely. Texas A&M is definitely a different animal, even among SEC schools. But I've met several people from up north who have said that a bucket list thing for them is to go to an SEC football game. So it's definitely a big, big culture thing up here. But do you have a favorite school that you've visited or played against? Like, is there one that like sticks out from some of the others that you've been to?
Boy, that's a tough one. Obviously spent most of my career in the Big Ten, and just like I said, just 1 year in the SEC at this point. I think because of the wave that they do at Iowa, waving to the Children's Hospital, I always thought that was really, really cool. Probably my favorite place because of that, because of why they're doing it, right? And that you talk about a passionate fan base, and I always thought that place is fun to play because the fans are, almost arm's length from you when you're on the sideline, right? Like when you're on the sideline talking to the players, making adjustments, they're right there in the conversation, and they're pretty creative with the things that they add to the conversation for sure.
I'm
So
sure.
it's a fun place. It's a great environment for college football for sure.
That one's really cool.
I will say it's a little interesting to have the fans so close. Definitely not like UGA where they have the hedges protecting them, so people
Right.
aren't too close to the
Yes.
field.
Big, big, big difference. Believe me.
Is there a particular coach or aspect of playing football at the college level that has influenced your decision to pursue coaching? Because I know that you were a college player before taking up this kind of new position. So, what about your college experience kind of pushed you to choose that career?
Yeah, I growing up, actually, my dad was a coach. He coached rugby my whole life at the college level and then at the high school level. So I was around coaching, and then actually in high school, I played for a really, really wonderful coach. He was the all-time winningest coach in the state of Illinois' history, Frank Lenti, and it was Coach Lenti and his coaching staff and the impact that they made on me. And I mentioned some of those things earlier, some of the growth mindset, the forcing me to be uncomfortable, right? Which as a, 14 to 17-year-old boy, I didn't enjoy at all. But, once I got to the point that I understood the value of everything that they taught, I wanted to have that same impact on others. I wanted to have the same opportunity to affect lives positively.
I think that's great. And I think that's where a lot of, I think, coaching jobs come from, not just in football, but across a lot of sports, is impact of other coaches. So I think that's great. And are there any coaches outside of the programs that you've been a part of that influence the way you want to coach your team?
Yeah, boy. We get so locked into what we do, what we know, right? But the other part about coaching is that, usually it's a fraternity that's willing to share ideas, right? And so I've been fortunate to be exposed to a lot of the great ones over time, right? Whether it was directly spending time with them or talking with somebody that has worked with them. So it'd be really challenging. The coaches I've worked for, right, from Randy Walker to Pat Fitzgerald to Mike Elko, like are unbelievable. And so to be able to add another name to that's specific. Obviously, you watch some of the success that Coach Saban and Coach Smart have had for so long over the years, and been fortunate to know guys that have coached for those guys and be able to gain those ideas, we're always looking for good ideas, right? We're always looking for what's some way to better connect with these young men, what's some way to be a better teacher, because at the heart of this thing, outside of being a mentor for character, it's teaching. And so we have to figure out ways to connect better. So I'm not sure I've given you a great answer, other than I've tried to get ideas from everywhere in my career. And I've learned, I say all the time, high school coaches come to visit us. I learn just as much from them, because we're all kind of in the same fight, right? All trying to win the hearts and minds of young men.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to football and just the coaching side. I think the willingness to learn from others and always look to be better no matter where it comes from, I think speaks a lot to the sport itself and kind of the community that's in that, no matter which direction it goes or what happens to the face of football. I think those roots are something that's really important, and something that I think especially fans love to see about their sport, is that they still have those roots no matter what kind of things are changing.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think a big part of coaching is adaptability, because no two teams are ever the same. And so a lot of times you have to change your approach from year to year, something we've seen a lot at Georgia. But on the subject of adaptability, how has recruiting changed from your first year of coaching to kind of where it's gotten to now?
How long is this podcast, right? It's night and day. Truly, from the time frame, from certainly just the stakes, right? When you add all of the things, and just say it very candidly, you add the financial aspect into it, everything is different. And I mentioned it earlier, in the end, it still is about 18 to 22-year-old young men and finding how to impact them. And so for as many things that have changed, for the rules and the timelines and all that stuff, it has still come down to building great relationships, right? Because in the end, you really can't impact somebody if you don't know them, right? And if they don't believe that deep in their heart that you do care about them and that you're doing what you're doing, right, for what's best for them, right? Because coaching isn't being a buddy, right? It truly is being demanding and holding young men to standards. So in order to hold someone to a standard, they have to believe that you're doing it for the right reasons. And so for all the things that have changed, the heart of it, which is relationships and helping young men find the right fit. And I say it throughout the recruiting process, and I have for whatever it is, 20 some years now. If we're not the right fit, don't come here, because you won't find the place where you can be the best version of yourself, right? That's what we're looking for, is in the end, you go find the right place that you can be your best. And sometimes they need some help from whoever they have around them to figure out what that looks like, right? To make sure that it does come down to choosing the fit for the right reasons for them.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good way to look at it. But do you think that there should be more of a focus on maybe high school recruits or transfer portal recruits, or do you kind of look at both with equal weight?
Any successful program, and you look at it over the years, is built through high school recruiting, right? That it's kind of what I said just a second ago, right? You're looking for those relationships and that ability to build that strong foundation so that you can help develop young men. So that the heart of every team is going to be built through that. And then just the nature of college football now is that the transfer portal exists and it's a real thing. And in a great majority of the cases, probably despite the narrative that's out there, in a great majority of the cases, right, like the transferring is happening for the right reason or for a specific reason, right? And so again, you're looking to target that. And so when something that most college football programs at the highest level have done at this point is kind of starting to use a modified version of the NFL model, which is to say, how do the great teams in the NFL how do they sustain it over a period of time? When you look at some of the places that have, obviously with the Patriots or the Chiefs that have won Super Bowls over and over again, but also the teams that have been successful, for a long period of years, the Steelers being one of those organizations that has not had this big dip that you've seen across the NFL, that, the typical roller coaster. And what we saw, and what, all the programs I've studied saw, is building through the draft and supplementing through free agency. So in our model, that's building the program, having the heart of the program through high school recruiting, and then supplementing where some fits need to be, in the transfer portal, finding again the right character, the right young man that's going to come in and be an asset to the culture in the locker room. That's what's, I think, going to develop long-term sustainability.
I think I've ever heard it put that way. You're definitely right that the narrative is a lot of Power Four schools are only looking at the portal and they're kind of forgetting about high school recruiting. But I mean, you can't recruit those transfer players if you don't recruit them out of high school. So I really like the way that you explained that. That actually gives a little bit more light on how the transfer portal is used at some of these bigger schools. But would you say that with how many players are actually in the transfer portal, do you feel that the O-line is affected in the same way that other positions are? Like, I know when a quarterback enters the transfer portal, it's a massive deal. Would you say that it's kind of the same for O-line, or is it a little bit different?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Every position is different in the portal, right? You just mentioned it, right? There's the marquee position, there's the quarterback one, where so much is placed on movement because only one of them plays, right? So much goes into eligibility, remaining roster, all of that, those type of things. O-line tends to be a highly valued position as well. Not obviously in the same way that quarterback, with again the marquee status and the one person out there, but that one of the jokes in the industry, there's just not enough large men in the world that can move well, and so finding those guys an important one, and I think everybody understands and sees the value. So it's not maybe that top marquee position, but it is a marquee position in the portal, just from need of depth at the position.
Absolutely.
I think that the O-line is oftentimes overlooked when you have, I'll say, these big playmakers like your quarterbacks and your wide receivers, but none of that happens unless your O-line can actually keep the line and defend and make sure that that defense isn't making it to your quarterback and to your receivers and to your tight ends and your running backs and everybody. That O-line makes the big difference, and you'll hear it thrown around Georgia all the time because a lot of times this is all we have, but like, your defense wins your championships. Your D-line, your O-line, those guys win it for you. They make all the difference in the world. So it does make a lot of sense that these would be such crucial positions in the portal. But I think because it's not always at the forefront of everybody's mind, it's not always seen that way. But I think that's really interesting that it still is. Like, no, it doesn't matter. Like, this position is still just as important and just as keen and just as needed. And I know that, the way the transfer portal culture has changed in a way that a lot of, I guess, the face of college football is changing and evolving, especially in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 seasons, and going into even the way that the playoffs have changed, going from 4 to now the 12-team playoff, creating a lot of new opportunities for teams that you don't usually see. And I know we had a lot of fun talking about this season and exploring this season. So has the way that you prepared your team or motivate your players changed with the way that the playoff expands, going from 4 to 12? Does that cause any coaching, I guess, mindset changes? And even as we're moving towards a possible 16-team playoff in the next couple of years?
Yeah, certainly with the expansion of the playoff, the heightened accessibility to it, that becomes a huge goal, right? And when you're in our conference and you have a legitimate opportunity to make it, that becomes critical goal for the program, because it's like playoffs in any sport. You get there and you got a chance to go win the national championship, and that's what we're all in it for, right? So long term, it's where you want to be sitting at the end of the season. And so do we talk about the playoff? Sure. Again, big picture, right? I don't believe that day-to-day sustainable success is based on that goal, though, necessarily, right? It in the end, it comes back to that day-to-day growth mindset and making sure that when you show up every day, and when players, again, 18 to 22-year-old young men, haven't changed much in the last 20 years, right? They still some days show up and they're great, and some days they show up and they're not, right? And saying that there's 12 or 16 teams in the playoff doesn't necessarily get them to be great that day. It's tapping into what is going to get them to be their best that day, and tapping into that growth mindset to allow us to go reach that long-term goal. But really, again, it's just that goal of being better when they put their head on their pillow at night than they were when they took their head off it in the morning.
I think that's great. I think that that's a really great point to make, and that kind of consistency that you hope to see in your programs and with your guys and your coaching staff is that, yes, this is something to work for and something to strive for, but like, we're not changing. This is still what we're doing and what we're working towards. And I think that's really important. So, of course, with all these major shifts in the college football landscape, such as other expansions to 14, 16 team playoffs, if Texas A&M aside, kind of disaffiliate for just a second, if you were the commissioner for a day, are there any sort of changes that you would make or keep the same? If you have the future of college football in your hands, what would you do?
Yeah, disaffiliate for a day is not a thing we do, right?
Well, I can't say we do it either. I do have my national championship cup in my hands.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's such a challenging question, right? I had the good fortune a few years ago to be on the football oversight committee and really get a behind the scenes look at how all of this stuff goes, right? And I say it that way because it's like there's so much more to all of the decisions that get made, right? There's so much more to the processes that there will be some national narrative or opinion about, oh, this wasn't good enough, or why did they only go to 12 versus 16? Why didn't they just make the immediate jump, right? There's some of the great things about college football are the long-term, long-standing traditions, right? And so there's a balance, right? And one of the things that just came out is that the House settlement, right? And I reference it like this: it's called the settlement, right? There's going to have to be some give and take, and there isn't a perfect solution. And this isn't the NFL. This isn't 32 franchises that we're trying to create the best for. This is certainly the Power Four, and there's the Group of Four, and it's trying to figure out with 130 some now teams in playing FBS football how to create the best solution. That's not an easy amount of constituents to satisfy, right? And so I would be revealing my ignorance if I offered a solution that would satisfy that many without being able to see all the angles, without being able to understand it all, right? So I think that sometimes the national leadership comes under fire for not, appeasing this group or that group. And no matter what decision gets made, people are going to be upset. That's the nature of leadership, right? So for one, happened to be enjoying watching how they're moving college football forward while honoring the traditions, and don't think that I can do it any better than them. So I don't know that I'm willing to reveal my lack of understanding by offering an answer to that one.
Well, I think that is just kind of the common notion surrounding, the commissioner and the board of, the NCAA football is, I know we are definitely quick to judge them on this podcast sometimes, and we do eat our words. It is hard to sit so far on the outside and act like we know anything about what they're doing. And of course, that you're right. That is just kind of what comes with leadership. There's always people that are going to be upset. And you're right. We do have 130 something football team. We're not the NFL. And I think that some people do compare college football a lot to the NFL, but I think that you can't really make that comparison just because it is so drastically different. I think even when it comes down to the culture, the wide scope of teams, I think the skills and opportunities between those teams, which is a lot of why I think they move towards the 12, the 14, the 16 team playoff, is to kind of level a little bit and create more opportunity outside of your Power Four schools, which was kind of the whole point. And I think something that we all might have fought a little bit at first, but I think had a lot of fun watching this past season. So I will say I am excited to see how they progress. And of course, we don't always agree with what they do, but it's also not our job. So
I also think that's part of the fun of college football is someone's always left out. And listen, I have a lot of fun watching people get upset on social media about their team getting left out of the playoffs. But that's part of football. You have these years where you're like, oh, we're a no doubter. And then you don't get picked to be in the playoffs. And it's something that ends up motivating like you as a fan and sometimes your team for the next season. And so as much as it angers me sometimes, I do really like that about college football.
I think it places so much value on the regular season, right? And you
Yes.
know that's what has been consistent throughout this thing is make sure that those 12 weeks hold the same value that they've held for so long, right? That when one loss at some point in this thing, one loss completely shattered your opportunity, right? You mentioned that now there's it's more inclusive, there's more opportunities, but right, let's make sure that that's what makes tuning into college football on Saturdays so exciting. That my gosh, this isn't the NFL where 8-8 could still get you to the Super Bowl if you make the playoffs. It's not quite the same way, right? So that's what makes it so fun.
Absolutely. I know I had a lot more fun watching college football this past season because there were so many more teams that had an opportunity. So like I found myself watching like Big 10, Big 12 games that I typically wouldn't tune into, but there were some teams that had an outside chance to make the playoffs. And so I wanted to see what they were all about. And I do really like that about the expansion to the 12 teams. It keeps me more interested in college football as a whole and not just Georgia and the three other SEC teams that I watch. How would you say the fan base has changed between like Duke and A&M and even going back to Northwestern where you spent a good bit of your career?
Well, volume at A&M is, you're talking Northwestern and Duke. I'm not saying this because it's on a podcast. I truly loved every second of my time there, and loved their passion for everything about their universities. But as private schools that were, somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 undergrads, right? And whatever, some probably 12 to 16,000 total, right? Texas A&M's the largest university in the country, right? With 75,000, it's just different, right? It's the volume makes the passion exponential. So I think that's the biggest thing is just here we are traveling on a family vacation, and every airport I've been in, I've seen somebody with the Aggie ring, right? It's just the volume and the instant connection that happens so widespread.
I will say that's part of the joy of being in an SEC school and in a bigger school is you do find somebody everywhere. I mean, even
Everywhere.
outside of Georgia, anywhere I've traveled, I can see a big G on somebody's hat, somebody's t-shirt, somebody's suitcase. I will say it's nice to be able to see somebody everywhere that you know is on your team. And I think that kind of speaks to the community and kind of unifying aspect of college football, and that it's not just a game and just a team to a lot of these fans. People will die on the hill for their teams. I can't say my family
Us
is any
included.
different.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially being the SEC, it does just mean more.
Yes,
That's
it
right.
does. I've been actually shocked at the amount of Georgia fans I've seen up here in Massachusetts. I've seen a lot of Georgia hats, gotten a lot of Go Dogs. It's somewhat comforting in a place where you never thought you'd see any of that. So on the subject, are there any other like SEC games that you always like to watch? Like, is there like a rivalry game or just one game a year that you just always like to watch?
Well, I wouldn't be able to just say one. At heart, I'm a college football fan too, right? So when I get the opportunity, I'm watching college football, and from afar, always watched all of those long-standing rivalries, right? Loved watching the Iron Bowl, loved watching the Egg Bowl, like all of it, I don't know that I could pick one, because if any of those fun rivalries were, the old cocktail party, all that stuff, like it was always like, oh, that's on. All right, let's watch it. That's been kind of my life.
Were you able to watch the Kick Six live?
No.
Oh, man.
I don't know why, and I couldn't even tell you what year that was. It's funny when you're a college football coach. I could tell you why we gave up a sack in 2011, right? And the team that I coached, but those other games kind of all blend together if I wasn't part of them, if that makes sense, right? It's just kind of how it goes, and some of them certainly stand out, but my personal experiences are pretty seared deeply into my brain.
I'm sure. Now, we got to ask, what's your opinion on UGA?
Feelings aside, good or bad?
Yeah.
Haven't had the experience of playing there just yet, but obviously have seen from afar the success Coach Smart's had, have admired what Coach Searles has done with the offensive line there. As I mentioned earlier, right, I always am looking to study successful people. That's something that is, something that Coach has done a great job preparing that offensive line, having them be good every single year. And some of the fundamentals that that he's put out there that is accessible on the internet or being able to buy, whatever, is stuff that I've certainly studied. I always am looking at successful people and trying to figure out how they're doing it better than I am, because for sure there's smarter people than me out there.
And then I don't have a physical bell today.
Wait,
so I'm just
wait,
gonna go.
wait.
Uncle Adam, I have some fun questions for you now that we got past all the good, fun college official questions. If you were an animal, what would you be? Like any animal.
Any animal. Yeah, I guess I'm a dog person at heart, right? I've always had dogs and grown up, and we have a couple right now, fiercely loyal, protective, and family oriented. So that's probably how I would describe myself. So I'll go with dog.
Great
Would you
answer.
be a bulldog?
That's what I was about to ask.
I had to throw that in there.
No, we have revelry at Texas A&M.
I was gonna ask.
That's true. That's true.
But I currently have a boxer and pit bull mix, and then a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. So some sort of pit bull or staff.
There you go. A good answer right there. Got that dog in you, like actually. I could throw a little bit in there. And then another one too, like what would you be if you weren't a coach? Like what would you want to do?
Yeah, you know what? I've been asked that question a lot in my life. And I don't have the best answer, because I don't know what as I said, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. It's something that I've dedicated my life to wanting to be great at and wanting to have an impact on others. I grew up, I mentioned my dad, my mom was a teacher growing up, and so saw her having impact on young people also. So it would probably be some sort of teacher, for the same, rooted in some of the same reasons that I'm coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of hear that through your responses too. I was thinking about that. I was looking through the questions, like as we were talking, I'm like, I know exactly what he's going to say for that. It just seems like the impact that you can have on people in similar professions to that would be a good fit for sure. And then my final question, it's kind of a quick Bridget Spell section today, since Taylor and Sarah already asked like a bunch of really good questions. But since you're in Texas, do you own a pair of cowboy boots yet, Uncle Adam?
So I
the important questions.
I keep being pressured. I haven't bought the boots yet. I have a hat, no boots, but I would imagine that I'll have the boots sooner than later. I will admit, I like the look. I'm all for it. So at some point soon.
You're easing your way into being a true captain.
Well, you're halfway there with the hat, so boots are the next logical choice.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
I'm expecting
baby
steps. The whole get up when we go down there for Sammy U. So
yes.
yes. So, but yeah, with that being said, that's all the questions I have. So thank you, Uncle Adam, for joining us.
Thank
for joining us
you.
today.
Yes. And
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Really had a great time.
So thank you so much for doing this interview with us and taking time out of your trip to do this. I know I really enjoyed getting to hear some of your questions and perspective on a lot of these things, and I think it was really beneficial, not just for us, but for any listeners out there. So thank you for doing this.
Glad to help.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and certainly wish you all the best, and you're more than welcome to come see the Sanford game if you're able to.
Well, we will take you up on that for sure. College Station is definitely a bucket list stadium of mine.